Some of the best stuff I've done has been to work instinctively and to not think through the process. It's not conscious thought. It's not this has to be this or that, or it's just about finding something that fits and flows, and that's the way that it works best for me.
Squeeze's 1979 hit Up The Junction tells a dramatic story with 7 verses, focusing on a troubled romance, poverty, and an unexpected pregnancy in South London. And the song really stands out with its unique theme and structure. It's more like a traditional English folk song than a new wave or post-punk tune. And unusually for a pop song, it has no chorus. This was a choice inspired by Bob Dylan's Positively 4th Street. And despite this, it became an unexpected hit. The song reached number 2 on the UK chart and sold 500,000 copies. And the story behind its creation is quite interesting. It's a story that features New Orleans, cheese and ham sandwiches, and even John Lennon's house. Hi, I'm Adam. Welcome back to Music Mongoose. If you love delving into music history like I do, then click subscribe and join the pack. It's rare to find songwriters writing about real working lives in pop songs. Aside from songs like Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles or The Jam's A Town Called Malice or even Pulp's Disco 2000, they'd often steer clear of depicting the lives of working class people. Chris Difford ignored this trend when writing Up The Junction, and it's a song that truly stood the test of time. A few years ago, I used to host a radio show on a station that dedicated itself to playing the best of British music, and there were always loads of songs that I'd grow tired of hearing, like ELO's Mr. Blue Sky, or Another Brick in the Wall, or Bohemian Rhapsody, for example. But Up The Junction by Squeeze is a song I never grew tired of hearing. It's that really tight narrative Ian Jury-style lyricism from Chris Difford that makes it so special. Along with Glenn Tilbrook's music, it makes the song both jolly and heartbreaking at the same time, painting this really vivid and bleak picture of life in a certain area in London. Let's go back to the mid-60s and Difford's childhood. Now, Difford's parents had often watched the Wednesday play on BBC One, and he became drawn to gritty slice-of-life dramas shown on the programme. One of these dramas was a Ken Loach-directed BBC adaptation of Nell Dunn's collection of short stories called, surprise surprise, Up The Junction. It depicted the lives of 3 young women working in a Clapham Junction factory. Now, Difford actually wrote the lyrics to Up The Junction while on tour in America. He didn't like touring very much, and he always felt homesick. So, in a hotel room in New Orleans, he was reaching for the imagery of home, and came up with Up The Junction. And according to him, he wrote the lyrics as quickly as you can read them, which to me is baffling. How can someone just spew out something as brilliant as Up The Junction? He later said he didn't consciously think about the song's structure when writing it. It was one of those songs that just came together. He believed that big songs seem to appear out of nowhere, and after that, you spend the rest of your life waiting for the next one to come along. The lyrics don't have any resemblance to the original Up The Junction by Nell Dunn, by the way, although they did share a few themes, of course, and he did nick the title, which famously only appears at the very end of the song. Difford has mentioned that he was inspired by Roxy Music's Virginia Plain, where its title only appears at the very end of the song as well. And the song's title in Up The Junction really serves as a sort of punchline at the end of this emotional journey of life in London. And the phrase itself, Up The Junction, is London slang for being in trouble, basically. It's sort of similar to the American phrase, up the creek without a paddle. It's also referring to Clapham Junction in Battersea, London. Clapham Common is also referenced, mentioned as the Windy Common in the first verse. Eventually, the lyrics would find their way to Glenn Tilbrook, who'd composed the music for the track. We'll get onto that in a sec, but first, let's rewind and find out how Glenn and Chris first met, because their relationship is quite important in the creation of this track. Aged just 15, Glenn saw an ad in a shop window. It was seeking a guitarist for a recording and touring band with influences like the Kinks, Lou Reed, and Glenn Miller. Now, Tilbrook had already been playing with Jools Holland for about a year at this point, but they hadn't connected as songwriters. So Tilbrook responded to the ad. He was the only one who did so, in fact. When Difford shared his lyrics with Tilbrook, he was blown away. Now, Difford had been writing songs since he was 11, and Tilbrook recognised a real uniqueness in his songwriting. And Difford's inspiration actually came from an English teacher at his school. This teacher would notice Difford scribbling poetry on his exercise books as a child and gave him Donovan and Bob Dylan albums. He told them that these people put poems to music, maybe that's something you could think about. From there, Difford was set on being the David Bowie of Deptford. Then he met Glenn Tilbrook and the two immediately clicked, forming a relationship as intense as a marriage. Difford was emotional and imaginative, while Tilbrook was more grounded and a naturally talented guitarist. They decided that Difford would write the lyrics, knowing Tilbrook would bring them to life with his music. As the band took shape, the pair lived together in a shared house, and Difford would leave lyrics for Tilbrook on a silver breakfast tray. Tilbrook would then take these lyrics and create vivid music to go along with them. Up The Junction marked a breakthrough, as it was the first of Difford's narrative lyrics to make it onto a record. And Tilbrook was proud of Difford for writing such a rich story. A couple having an unexpected baby and the relationship unraveling due to the man's drinking, all neatly within a pop song. Tilbrook would later say putting music to such powerful lyrics felt like both a privilege and an inspiration. Now, the song itself draws on traditional English music. As a teenager, Chris Difford would take trips to these rural folk clubs in Kent, where he listened to the performers there tell stories in songs. The rhyming couplets in Up The Junction were inspired by Ian Dury, known for his music hall-style hits like Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. Unlike Dury, Difford used half-rhymes that highlight the narrator's personal feelings in Up The Junction. As in, she gave birth to a daughter, within a year a walker, she looked just like her mother if there could be another. And the song would become very well known for these half-rhymes. While recording at Pink Floyd's Britannia Row studio, Glenn Tilbrook worked on Up The Junction during a lunch break. The rest of the band had gone for lunch, cheese and ham rolls, according to Tilbrook. Sitting at the piano with his guitar, he finished the tune by the time everyone returned, and chose to leave out a chorus, believing it would disrupt the natural flow of Chris Difford's storytelling.
And I stayed behind and looked at this lyric, and it was one of those lovely occasions where I didn't really have to work at anything.
According to Tilbrook, with such vivid lyricism, his job was to create a tune that was pleasant but not distracting. He wanted the lyrics to be at the forefront.
And it must be a real struggle sometimes for Glenn to get my lyrics and think, how am I going to put music to this? What emotion does it seek?
Now, when they first presented this song to their record label, A&M, they rejected it. The managing director, Derek Green, suggested it needed a hook at the start. You see, at first, Jules' keyboard part at the beginning wasn't included, but now it's hard to imagine the song without it. It does add something, that really recognisable intro. Fair play to Derek Green for making that happen. Now, Squeeze's manager doubted that Up The Junction would become a hit. He even said he'd eat his own hat if it charted. Then it reached number 2 in 1979, and it remains one of Difford's favourite tracks. It's unclear if their manager did actually eat their hat or not. Now, as for the music video, it was filmed in the kitchen of John Lennon's former home, where he'd made the Imagine promotional video. Tilbrook found it surreal to be in such an iconic setting at the start of their career. Now, the band were there primarily to shoot the video for Cool for Cats. After that, the director said they're gonna do Up The Junction as well. Now, at this point, they had all had quite a few beers. This explains their bleary appearance in the video. Around this time, the press started calling Difford and Tilbrook the new Lennon and McCartney, a label their marketing team obviously latched onto. Tilbrook thinks they never quite reached the levels of Lennon and McCartney, but he does think Up The Junction has earned its place among timeless classics. And I'd have to agree with that. Now, by the way, the self-pitying protagonist in the tune may have been taken by the devil, but in 1998, the girl from Clapham reappears in another Squeeze song, A Moving Story, from Domino. In this song, she had remarried, moved to the coast, and her daughter was preparing to wed. Difford felt she deserved a happier ending, which is lovely. Now, if you like the song, you will love this cover of it by a Greater Manchester band called The Lathams.
I never thought it would happen with me and a girl from Clapham. Out on the windy common, that night I ain't forgotten.
They do a brilliant take on it, and they are a brilliant indie band, well worth a listen. And to learn the story behind another iconic song, click over here to find out how Def Leppard made Pour Some Sugar on Me.